Which dioxin variant would be suspect at the scene of a vent and burn of 10 cars full of vinyl chloride? The most likely dioxin variant that would be present at the scene of a vent and burn of vinyl chloride is TCDD. What are the least and most toxic dioxin variants? The least toxic is OCDD, and the most toxic is TCDD. Norfolk Southern and the EPA failed the test for dioxin at the site of a vent and burn of tank cars full of vinyl chloride. Might this be considered criminal, and which laws might that have violated? The failure to test for dioxin at the site of a vent and burn of tank cars full of vinyl chloride could be considered criminal if shown that they acted with gross negligence in violating applicable laws and regulations. The following laws or regulations may have been violated. The RCRA, a federal law, governs the management of hazardous waste from cradle to grave. If the vinyl chloride released from the cars is classified as hazardous waste under the RCRA, Norfolk Southern and the EPA may have violated the law by failing to properly manage and test for the presence of dioxin at the site. CERCLA, aka Superfund, is a federal law providing for the cleanup of hazardous waste sites. If the vent and burn site is determined to be a hazardous waste site under CERCLA, Norfolk Southern and the EPA may have violated the law by failing to properly investigate and clean up the site, including testing for the presence of dioxin. The Clean Water Act is a federal law regulating the discharge of pollutants into navigable waters of the United States. If the vent and burn released pollutants into nearby bodies of water, Norfolk Southern and the EPA may have violated the Clean Waters Act by failing to properly test and manage the pollution. If criminal charges are pursued, it would be up to the prosecuting authority to determine whether there is sufficient evidence to support a criminal prosecution and whether that evidence meets the legal requirements for charging and convicting individuals or organizations of criminal offenses. The EPA is defending their actions by saying dioxin is an everyday chemical, released by regular human activities such as a bonfire. Is that fair, or does it grossly misrepresent the relative difference in different dioxin variants? The EPA's defense that dioxin is an everyday chemical released by regular human activities, such as a bonfire, is not entirely fair, as it ignores the fact that different dioxin variants have vastly different levels of toxicity. While it is true that dioxins can be formed as byproducts of certain types of combustion, such as the burning of wood or garbage, it is also true that some dioxin variants, such as 2,3,7,8 tetrachlorodibenzo-P-dioxin or TCDD, the most toxic dioxin variant, can cause a range of serious health effects even at very low concentrations. Comparing the toxicity of TCDD to that of other less toxic dioxin variants, such as octachlorodibenzo-P-dioxin, reveals that the EPA's defense does not accurately represent the relative differences in toxicity between different dioxin variants. While both TCDD and OCDD are technically dioxins, the toxicity of TCDD is orders of magnitude higher than that of OCDD, and exposure to even tiny amounts of TCDD can have serious health effects. It is important to accurately characterize the toxicity of different dioxin variants and to take appropriate measures to minimize exposure to those that are highly toxic, such as TCDD. This includes a proper management of the hazardous waste and pollution, as well as monitoring and testing of potentially contaminated sites to ensure that appropriate cleanup and mitigation measures are taken. Is it fair for the government to conveniently not address dioxin in order to avoid public fears and concern about the widespread release directly into their atmosphere? No, it is not fair for the government to conveniently not address the issue of dioxin in order to avoid public fears or concerns about the widespread release directly into the atmosphere. The government has a responsibility to be transparent with the public about potential risks to human health and the environment, especially in situations where hazardous substances have been released into the environment. Failing to address the issue of dioxin and its potential health effects would be a disservice to the public, as it could prevent individuals from taking appropriate precautions to protect themselves and their families. In addition, it could lead to a loss of trust in government and other regulatory bodies tasked with protecting public health and safety. How far will the dioxin spread over 5 years after vinyl chloride is vented and burned? It is difficult to predict with certainty how far dioxin may spread over a period of 5 years after vinyl chloride is vented and burned. The spread of dioxin will depend on many factors, including the amount and concentration of dioxin released, the environmental conditions in the surrounding area, and the extent to which the dioxin is transported through air, water, and other media. Dioxin is a persistent organic pollutant that can travel long distances through the air and water. Its movement can be influenced by factors such as wind patterns, precipitation, and temperature. In addition, dioxin can adhere to soil and other surfaces, where it can persist for years and be transported through runoff or erosion. Given the persistence and mobility of dioxin, it's possible that it could spread over a wide area over a period of just 5 years after a release event. However, the actual extent of the spread will depend on many factors. As mentioned above, it is important to note that the health effects of exposure to dioxin are cumulative and can take years to manifest. So continued monitoring and testing will be necessary to assess the long-term health impacts of this dioxin release.